are. Awesome. All right, so let's kick it off. And so where we're going to pick up is where we left off last week on page 38. And for those that are like new to the study or just like coming to this thing here today for the first time, where we're at is in a chapter called More About Alcoholism. And More About Alcoholism is really laser beam focusing us in on really step one and the mental obsession. What we're trying to laser beam on laser beams. I don't know why that word is so hard for me. Pew, pew, pew. Yeah, you got it. We're a pew, those laser beams of step one and the hopelessness of alcoholism. That's not the right tone for the hopelessness, but welcome. So we're laser beaming into the mental obsession, and that mental obsession is that thought that I have when I am sober that tells me this time will be different. Nobody will ever know. You know, my problem was drinking in Calgary, but I can pop over to San Jose. It'll be different there. You know what I mean? Or my drug use was my problem, but I can drink like a lady. That sort of laser beam focused into that insane thought. And so we had this illustration of the jaywalker, and you can see a picture of that right behind Rob. It's a little sticker that I had made. It says recovered jaywalker. And it was talking about like, wow, that seems like a ridiculous metaphor. And so it goes on, very bottom paragraph of page 38. That's where we're going to dive in and kick it off. So it says, some of you are thinking, yes, what you tell us is true, but it doesn't fully apply. And I love this. I love this because this is the book meeting us where we're at. Anyone here ever make a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and think, yes, some of what you were saying is true, but it doesn't fully apply? Anyone here ever come to a meeting and be like, listen, I'm going to find the differences. I'm not like you. I'm way older than you. I'm way younger than you. I haven't had a DUI, like all the differences. And the book is addressing that. Oh, I'm not like you. We admit we have some of the symptoms. Now, keep in mind, we got two. Some of these symptoms, which we have two of them. One is that lack of control. Once I start, that I cannot control the amount that I take and I need more, and lack of choice. When I say that I'm not going to do it again, I end up drinking or using or, acting out on that behavior, whatever brings you to this study again. So we got two symptoms, and we admit that we have some of the two, but no. We're not as bad as you guys. And it says, but we have not gone to the extremes you fellows did, nor are we likely to. Nor are we likely to, for we understand ourselves so well after what you have told us that such things cannot happen again. We have not lost everything in life through drinking, and we certainly do not intend to. Thanks for the information. If you're wondering, that is as about a polite go F yourself and F off as you can get. Is very polite. And I mean, like in early days, that was me. I was always thinking, oh, we're at the bottom of page 38 and we popped right up to the top of 39. Absolutely. And so in that, it's that idea of like, man, I'm looking at the differences. I'm looking at the ways that this illness doesn't apply to me, that these diagnostic criteria don't apply to me. But the reality is when I saw myself for who I really was, lack of control and lack of choice, man, that was me. I couldn't deny it. And so, yeah, if you ever I found before the meeting, we were talking about like getting fancy big books and stuff. And I was like, I was just given a fancy big book, but that has ribbons. And one of my bookmarks is literally a twig. And I was like, what's a twig? I just found the twig. Keep coming back. I know that I will. So it says that may be true of certain non-alcoholic people who, though drinking foolishly and heavily at the present time, are able to stop or moderate because their brains and bodies have not been damaged as ours were. And I can ask myself, hey, is my experience that I have been able to stop and then stay stopped, or have I been able to moderate for any considerable period of time? Now, I always throw this out. If you're hanging out with me for the hour, probably not. You know what I mean? If you don't got anything better to do on a Monday night than hang out with me, it's probably an indication that once you start, you don't have control and that you've tried all these different ways to to stop and to stay stopped, and it hasn't worked. And then it says, but the actual or potential alcoholic, with hardly an exception, will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. Now, I want to point that out. This is in italics. Now, when we speak of italics, italics is always important because it's with emphasis. But for those that remember some of the history, when this book was first printed, to get anything in italics, it cost extra money. Exactly. Now go to your home group and try to convince your home group to spend extra money on anything. And you will immediately realize what a miracle it is that about 80 drunks who did not have money agreed to spend money on putting that in italics. So it says, this is a point we wish to emphasize, to re-emphasize, to smash home upon our alcoholic readers as it has been revealed out of bitter experience. So here's the thing, self-knowledge works in any other area of my life. You know what I'm saying? Self-knowledge works for me to avoid. Oh, awesome. Welcome. We're on page 39. Glad you're here. So self-knowledge, it works for any other area of my life. It works. We were kind of talking it before the meeting about how my stomach stopped handling coffee. I got some knowledge about that. It doesn't process coffee well. So I stopped taking coffee, and that worked. My desire to stop drinking, it wasn't really a desire. I didn't have a lot of desire to quit, but I needed to function, so I stopped drinking coffee. But my desire and my willpower to not drink coffee has been successful. But not with this. Me knowing I'm an alcoholic has no power to keep me sober. Me knowing that I have this illness has no power. Me understanding that I have this allergy, understanding that once I start, I can't stop, that doesn't keep me sober. Me having knowledge about the mental obsession, being able to give you examples from my own life of the mental obsession, that doesn't keep me sober. Heck, I can screen share the cycle of alcoholism or the cycle of addiction, and I can give you examples from my own life of that. That doesn't keep me sober. Heck, we're going to talk about our homeboy. He doesn't have to be our homeboy. He's my homeboy, but he can be our homeboy Fred. And I'm going to tell you that handsome fellow is Harry Brick. And I can tell you all these fun facts about Harry. That won't keep me sober. And so that's what it's saying. What I know does not keep me sober. And that's what we want to emphasize, re-emphasize, smash home. Self-knowledge is not a solution. And I love that it says, as it has been revealed out of our bitter experience. And again, one of the things I always want to emphasize, this book is not like a bunch of intellectuals in their ivory towers saying, this is what you drunks should do. No, it is people like us who have had experience with our illness, but have also had experience with recovery and the solution and the 12 steps. They're saying this is what we have experienced time after time and time again. Self-knowledge has not worked as a solution. So it says, let us take another illustration. This is Fred. So Fred, his real name is Harry Brick. And his story was in the first edition, and it was called A Different Slant. And if you're wondering, like, Harry Brick, I bet he's a handsome fella. If you look right behind Rob, you'll see that handsome fella. I always like calling like some of the history guys. I'm like, handsome fellas. I just gas him up a little bit. You know, that's Harry Brick. And so we'll call him Fred because that's what it says in the book. And so Fred is a great guy. I mean, who wouldn't love Fred? So Fred is a partner in a well-known accounting firm. Go for Fred. Look at him. Fred has a stable job. Is there anyone has ever, who wouldn't? He's great. Is there anyone here who ever came to the rooms and were like, hey, no, I was able to hold on a job. I'm not like you guys, right? So Fred's going to help us punch through that denial, smash through that denial. His income is good. Full. He has a fine home, is happily married, and the father of promising children of college age. And so again, anyone here said, no, but I'm married. No, but I got kids and my kids are doing well, right? Some of these things that, no, I'm not like you. No, I don't have that illness. Fred's got those things. Good for Fred. Lovely. I'm just going to gas him up as we go. That's great. And the last round of Big Book study, a friend of the Big Book Compendium, Fred, came in, and so I got to gas up actual Fred as well as Harry Brick Fred. So it was a Fredtopia of Freds. I will focus. All right. And it says, he is so attractive, a personality that he makes friends with everyone. Man, who wouldn't love Fred? He's a good guy. Yeah, everyone in chat is like, Fred's great. We love him. Fred's our guy, right? And so again, he's not this like recluse. He's not this weirdo. He's not this abnormal guy, right? No, I'm not like those weirdo alcoholics in those meetings, or those weirdo addicts, or those weirdo codependents, or whatever. No. Well, Fred's a normal guy. And it says, if ever there was a successful businessman, it is Fred, to all appearances. So what we can see is that he is a stable, well-balanced individual. And none of that is enough to keep him sober, because it goes on to say, yet he is alcoholic. And again, what we're trying to do is just push through those levels of denial that I don't want to say we all have, but I think we all have when we get here, all those ways I'm different, or, I don't have to do this thing. And so, yet he's alcoholic. We first saw Fred about a year ago in a hospital where he had gone to recover from a bad case of jitters. And so that is a sign that he's got the physical allergy. So if you're writing in your book, you can make a little note of physical allergy, because somebody who has the ability to control the amount they drink every single time is not drinking themselves into the hospital with a bad case of jitters. Now, I mean, we can just do a casual. Anyone here ever drank themselves into the hospital? There weren't too many hands up. I was like, oh no, just me. Okay, cool, can't relate. I mean, I just read about it happening to Fred. It didn't happen to me. It happened to me. All right. So he gone to, and it says it was his first experience of this kind, and he was much ashamed of it. Far from admitting he was an alcoholic, he told himself that he came to the hospital to rest his nerves. So Fred, he's like, listen, I don't have this alcoholism thing. I'm just a little anxious and a little stressed with all the work stuff. You know what I needed? I really needed a vacation, and I couldn't think of anywhere better to have a vacation than, New York City's Memorial Hospital to recover. Well, it's probably the town's hospital to recover from jitters. I can't think of anywhere else I would rather be, And anyone here ever have a little bit of that delusion? No, I'm in rehab for the horses. If you're able to go to one of those expensive ones where they have horses, I don't have a problem. I'm just into equestrian things, I didn't go to rehab and I didn't get to spend any time with horses, but I'm just, and it says the doctor intimated strongly that he might be worse than he realized. So the doctor's like, hey, I think you might be an alcoholic. I think you might have a drinking problem. Just try to help nudge him along his way. For a few days, he was depressed about his condition. He made up his mind to quit drinking altogether. Now, if we go back to that cycle of alcoholism, making up his mind to quit drinking altogether, that is him swearing off. So that's it. He's saying, I am never going to drink again. I am done. He's swearing off. Now, we can look back in our lives. Have we ever had any examples of us saying, that's it, I'm never going to drink again, or I'm not going to have the same consequences again? Let's see how this goes. So it never occurred to him that perhaps he could not do so in spite of his character and standing. So he's got good character, like he's a good man, a wonderful man, and good standing, which is like he's able to be a successful human being, like living in society. Fred would not believe himself an alcoholic, much less accept a spiritual remedy for his problem. Listen, I'm not like you guys. I don't got to do what you guys, do. So he's got no problem. So he's got no need for a solution. So it says, we told him what we knew about alcoholism. He was interested and conceded that he had some of the symptoms, but he was a long way from admitting that he could do nothing about it himself. Now, oh, awesome. Thank you guys for putting the things in the chat. When it says we told him what we knew about alcoholism, what the members of Alcoholics Anonymous would do is they would sit down and they would explain what the physical allergy was like, and from their own experience, what happened to them once they started to drink. And then they would share from their own experience what happened when they said, I'm never going to drink again. And that thought came to mind that told them, no, this time will be different. No, this time I can drink. I'll only go out for 3 drinks this time. And we believed the lie. And they would share from their own experience what that was like, and share from their own experience their examples of the cycle, swearing off, saying, I'm never going to do it again. How they would feel in sobriety, some of that restless, irritable, discontented. And that thought that came that said, no, but nobody will ever know. I'll go out for 3 drinks. My problem was drinking in Calgary, but I can drink somewhere else. Or my problem, for somebody like me, my problem is alcohol, but I can smoke crack like a lady. And we pick up and off we go. We get that ease and comfort, but it takes me. I need more. And the more Fred's getting 2-stepped. It takes me, the more I drink or use, the more I need. And he goes to a spree and he burns his life to the ground. Yes, they're 12-stepping him. They weren't 2-stepping him. Sorry, my brain was thinking, never mind. It's real. By the way, if you're like, boy, I have a question, put it in the chat. Or if you're like, boy, I'd like to see Paige go on a tangent, put it in the chat. Oh no, it doesn't take much. Oh, going a little dirty, where we end up, I don't know. So he's being 12-stepped, and they're sharing from their experience, and it comes to, and he burns his life to the ground, and he swears off, and never again. And they're sharing from their own life, examples of the cycle, examples of the obsession, examples of the allergy. Enough for him to be interested and conceding he had some of the symptoms. So again, lack of choice, lack of control. We got 2, and he's like, oh, I got some of those, but not all of those, even though there's only 2. But he was a long way from admitting that he could do nothing about it himself. He was positive that this humiliating experience, plus the knowledge he had acquired, would keep him sober the rest of his life. Self-knowledge would fix it. Now, if you remember back to Bill's story, and today, 89 years ago, it's the anniversary of Bill Wilson showing up to the town's hospital. So it's got a perfect to reference. If you remember Bill Wilson's first trip to the town's hospital, he learns about the obsession, he learns about the allergy, and Bill Wilson's like, self-knowledge will fix it. I've got it. And it didn't work. He drank again, right? And then he goes back to the hospital, and then he learns no step 1, no step 2 for Fred. Yeah, so in the chat, Fred's got no problem. He's got no need for a solution. And that explains why it's important for me to understand the hopeless nature of my illness. Because, man, if I don't have this thing, I could watch Netflix or Hulu or Amazon Prime. You know what I mean? There's other things I could be doing. Although Rob and I have been talking about how, Paige, what would you do with your time? I don't know. I'd have to find a hobby. But if I don't have a problem, I'm not going to grab a hold of this solution, and I'm sure as heck not going to do these steps that'll get me to the solution. That's a whole lot of work. I don't want to do that. But Bill Wilson, he had self-knowledge, and then he drank again. And then in his second trip to the town's hospital, he overheard that he was going to die of his alcoholism. The best case scenario, he would end up locked away in an asylum. And worst case scenario, he would die during a heart attack during withdrawal. And so he had self-knowledge, and then he had fear, and then he drank again. And you see, for somebody who does not have alcoholism, self-knowledge is a solution. Fear is a solution. Humiliating experiences are solutions. It's enough. But for somebody who has this illness, it's not enough. Anyone, you don't have to do a show of hands if you don't want to. Anyone here ever have self-knowledge? Anyone here ever have humiliating experiences? Anyone here ever had fear and serious consequences? Yeah, it wasn't enough for me. So it says, we heard no more of Fred for a while. One day, we were told he was back in the hospital. This time he was quite shaky, so he went on a bender. You know what I This time he was quite shaky. He soon indicated that he was anxious to see us, and I love the transition. So depending on how well I do for time, we're going to read Fred's story out of the first edition story. It's very short. It's so interesting. But in the first edition story, if I don't read it, what I'll do is I'll say when they first came to meet with him, he was only doing it to be polite. The second time after this relapse, Fred, he's like, oh, I need these guys. I'm in trouble, So he's got some willingness. So he soon indicated he was anxious to see us. The story he told is most instructive, for here's a chap absolutely convinced he had to stop drinking. So he knew he was done. He did not want to drink again. He had sworn off. Who had no excuse for drinking. Now, last week we spoke about Jim. Jim had some resentments. Jim had some stuff going on. Lovely wife and family as well. Not judging them, but he had some resentments. He had some stuff going on. We're going to see. It was a beautiful day. Not a cloud on the horizon. Fred's going to drink. Who had no excuse for drinking. Who exhibited splendid judgment and determination in all his other concerns. So I have judgment and determination in other areas of my life. And it says, yet was flat on his back, nevertheless. Flat on his back, hopeless, hopeless. Let him tell you about it. I was much impressed with what you fellows said about alcoholism. And I frankly did not believe it would be possible for me to drink again. I rather appreciated your ideas about the subtle insanity which precedes the first drink. Now, when we talk about the subtle insanity which precedes the first drink, that is the mental obsession. And we're going to see, and what we're going to do is really see, where did Fred go insane? Where did the mental obsession kick in for Fred? Just like we did for Jim. We pointed that out with the jaywalker. We pointed that out with the man of 30. We're going to see, where does the mental obsession kick in for Fred? So it's subtle insanity, which precedes the first drink. So the mental obsession, the thought that I have before I drink, because before I take a drink or a drug or reach out in a codependent or addictive behavior, I have to have a thought. And that thought that tells me I can do it, that is the baffling feature of my problems, of my illness. So I rather appreciated your ideas about the subtle insanity which precedes the first drink, but I was confident it could not happen to me after what I had learned. I reasoned I was not so far advanced as most of you fellows, so I'm not as bad as you guys. My alcoholism hasn't progressed quite as far. And that I had been usually successful in licking my other personal problems. So he's able to deal with things on his own. Other areas of life, he's successful and confident. He's got it. And that I would therefore be successful where you men failed. So he was able to see, no, I'm not like you. I got this thing. I felt I had every right to be self-confident. It would be only a matter of exercising my willpower and keeping on guard. And so here's the thing. If I have this illness and I am trying to use willpower and keeping on guard, I'm going to drink again. Like, that is not a sufficient substitute for somebody like me. He's going to use all, and there's other areas in my life where willpower and keeping on guard, it works. I'm kind of fingers hoping that at some time in my life I'll be able to drink coffee again, so I don't want to use that metaphor too much. But I have an allergy to onions and I have an allergy to peppers, which again, I'm so much fun. I can't go with you to Chipotle or Dunkin' Donuts. I can't go anywhere. So I keep on guard. So if you were like, want to go to Chipotle, I'd be like, I don't know if I can. There's probably not a lot that I can eat. And that keeping on guard works. And that willpower works. I can check the ingredients, and that is sufficient. That doesn't do anything for me with my alcoholism. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. So, hey, again, anyone here ever try willpower and staying on guard? Yeah. And again, if you're listening to me natter on for about an hour, it didn't work. You have other options. Yeah. Absolutely. Heck yeah. So it says, in this frame of mind, so in this mindset of I'm just going to stay on guard, I'm just going to use my willpower, I went about my business. And for a time, all was well. I had no trouble refusing drinks and began to wonder if I had not been making too hard work of a simple matter. Now, I want to point this out. Fred does not go full-blown insane here. The mental obsession has not fully hit, but there's a subtlety that happens. And there's a subtlety that can happen for those of us that have been around this thing for a while. Actually, there's two. I was only going to talk about one, but there's another one I'm going to mention. So there's a thing that happens. I come to the rooms of 12 steps and I dive in, I get a sponsor. I go through the steps quickly and thoroughly through this book. And you know what happens? Boom. It's amazing. It's incredible. It works, honestly. Otherwise, we wouldn't be hanging around reading this book. Like, it works and it's on fire. And then life gets busy and things happen. And I don't know, we kind of stop doing the stuff. And there's a slow backing away. And then the problems start piling up. And I start thinking, the work couldn't possibly help. You know what I mean? Like the steps, no, that couldn't. This is different. Now, keep in mind, when I was active in fully doing this work, it worked. My life was amazing. Things were great. I was on fire. That's not that I didn't have problems. Problems do happen. But man, and I'm not doing the work now, but I'm absolutely convinced the work could not help. Man, that's a pattern that I have seen. It's a pattern that I've experienced, And there's this also subtle insanity that happens in that process. And it is the slow backing away from the actions that allow me to live in a state of grace where the mental obsession is gone. Too hard work of a simple matter. I don't need to be going to so many meetings. None of my sponsees are staying sober. I'm not really helping. I'm going to focus on me. By the way, that's not true. So many of them are staying sober. It's like a little overwhelming and I don't know how to schedule everyone in, So nobody in my home group likes me, I really got to, and I'm not saying we ignore our families, but it is the erosion of the actions. Prayer, meditation. No, I don't need to do that today. Evening review. Who does that every day? And it's that slow erosion of the actions that allow me to live in a place of grace. And very suddenly I'm in a place where things are not good. And so I can see that subtle insanity happening with Fred. Making too hard work of a simple matter. I was blowing that whole thing out of proportion. It's not as bad as I thought. And now I like to do this. I like to do this thing with Fred, and it's a game and it's a joke. I like to call it, let's see if we can find Fred's triggers. And again, I'm making a joke. My real problem is that I have a mental obsession that takes me back time and time again to that first drink. The problem is never outside of myself. The problem is within me in a sense of separateness from a power greater than myself. That is my problem. That is why I drink again. And which is good news, because if the problem is out there, I'm in trouble because I can't control out there. But if the problem is in here, we've got good news. But I like to play a game like where it's like, how like sometimes it's like, okay, you just got to watch your triggers. Okay, let's see if we can. And I'm making a joke. And for anyone that came and was like, what's she talking about at this big book study? I'm making a joke. Let's see if we can find Fred's triggers. All right. I wonder. It says one day I went to Washington to present some accounting evidence. What could have been his trigger? Well, I wonder if it was because he was out of town. Could going out of town be a trigger? So he went to Washington to present some accounting evidence to a government bureau. Page 41. I had been out of town before during this particular dry spell, so there was nothing new about that. Darn. Out of town, that couldn't have been his trigger. I wonder if he's feeling physically unwell. I wonder if he's, feeling under the weather, maybe a little hungry, angry, lonely, tired, maybe something like that. Physically, I felt fine. Darn, that couldn't be his trigger. I wonder, does he have any pressing problems or worries? Could that be his trigger? Neither did I have any pressing problems or worries. Gosh darn it, that couldn't be his trigger. What about maybe his business didn't come off very well? That must have been it. The business didn't come off well. No, it says my business came off well. I was pleased and knew my partners would be too. You know what it is? I bet his triggers is clouds. It's got to be clouds. It's the big clouds in the sky. That's got to be the thing that makes him drink. Let's see. It was the end of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon. What? That can't be it then. Darn it. Okay. And it says, I went to my hotel. Well, he'd already been there, so the hotel can't be the trigger. And leisurely dressed for dinner. Well, presumably he was already dressed for the, presentation for the government bureau. So getting dressed probably isn't his trigger. Let me see if I can figure it out. And it says, as I crossed the threshold of the dining room, the thought came to mind that it would be nice to have a couple cocktails with dinner. That was all, nothing more. That's it. We found his trigger, thresholds. All he's got to do is watch out for thresholds. Just avoid thresholds and he'll be okay. If you're like, what the heck is a threshold, Paige? It's a doorway. Yeah, it's just a doorway. So all he's got to do is just avoid slippery places, which are doorways. And as long as he doesn't go through any doorways, he'll be okay. And so thank goodness. And I'm gonna, yeah, you know what? Let's pop over to page 160. And this is a fun little tie-in that I like to do. So page 160, and we're going to the second full paragraph. It starts, many a man. And so it says, many a man. And just some context about what we're talking about here. In early AA in Akron, Ohio, there was the home that was donated to some of these members of Alcoholics Anonymous, really for the Oxford group, but to kind of keep it simple. This house that was donated where they would go and have these meetings. And so we're talking about that house, that meeting location. So it says, many a man, yet days from his hospital experience, has stepped over the threshold of that home into freedom. And I love that as a tie-in, because the promises of this book, right, of Alcoholics Anonymous, the book Alcoholics Anonymous, I can go anywhere, and thank goodness I can cross thresholds, and deeper than that, cross thresholds into freedom. So that's just my little threshold joke. And if you're wondering, yep, that's right, I have a threshold joke. That's who I am. Keep coming back. Or don't. There's different facilitators here at this thing. I get it. But so back to page 41. So his problem is not the thresholds. His problem is the inevitability of the first drink because of the mental obsession. Anywho, going back to the italics on page 41. As I crossed the threshold of the dining room, the thought came to mind that it would be nice to have a couple of cocktails with dinner. That was all, nothing more. That is the mental obsession. The thought came to mind. And in that moment, when the thought came to mind that he could have a couple cocktails, he didn't think about his previous hospital experience. He didn't think to play the tape to the end. He didn't think of the consequences. He didn't think about what how the alcoholics had warned him. Hey, this is a bad idea. No, a couple of cocktails with dinner. That would be nice. So that is the mental obsession. I ordered a cocktail and my meal. Then I ordered another cocktail. After dinner, I decided to take a walk. When I returned to the hotel, it struck me a highball would be fine before going to bed. So I stepped into the bar and had one. And what we can see is the physical allergy starting to kick off. And if you're wondering, that's often what it looks like. Oh, I'll just have another drink. Oh, just one more. Oh, yeah, that's actually helpful. A highball, not that the other stuff you put in the chat isn't. All the stuff you do, Rob, is very, very, very helpful. But for those that don't know, a highball is a cocktail. And yeah. Oh, it's got 4 or 5 ice cubes specifically. That you can tell that I was not a drinker that had a lot of ice. In my drinking career, that it requires frozen beverages require a level of sophistication that was outside of my realm of feasibility. But yeah, highball is a mixed drink. Anyway, so we see that being that physical allergy kicking off, and often at times it looks like, oh, I'll just have one more. Oh, just one more. And oh, you know what? Now I'll have shots. Heck, why not? That's what it looks like. So we're seeing that allergy kick off. Then it just looked like he changed his mind. So it says, I remember having several more that night, and plenty the next morning. And what we're going to see is Fred going on a spree. Again, I always say it like spree because it sounds fun. For those of us who have been on sprees, it's way more fun to say than it is to experience, especially the morning after. But here he is going on his spree. So I remember having several more that night and plenty the next morning. I have a shadowy recollection of being in an airplane bound for New York and of finding a friendly taxi cab driver at the landing field instead of my wife. That's a big oops. If you're wondering, that is not a little oopsie doopsies. That is a big oopsies. Just again, I'm not married. I've not ever been married. I have been in a codependent common law. But if you do not find your spouse at the landing field and instead find a taxi cab driver, that's an oopsies. Also, a shadowy recollection, that sounds like a brownout to me, blackouts. And I'll be honest with you guys, I was a year sober before I learned that blackouts were not something that everybody experienced. I remember I was in university and people were talking in university. It's like, they were like, I had a blackout last night. I'm actually really quite scared and concerned. And I quietly went, like, that doesn't happen to you every time? I've been sober for a while. I didn't, by the way, that was my inner monologue. I wasn't going to engage them with that sort of conversation. So blackout is when, if you're wondering, I'll just share with you from my experience. That's where I am living my alcoholic life and I start drinking. And then I just engage casually in time travel and I fade to black and come to on a Tuesday in a new place, in a new location. Will I have pants? Time travel, That's a blackout. Shadowy recollection is a bit more of a brownout when you got some pieces to string together. Little less advanced time travel. And I would always, not always, but I would often joke, listen, I don't have a problem. I'm just really into science, time travel. If you're wondering, my loved ones did not find that humorous. Anywho, so he goes to the, finding the taxi cab driver at the landing field instead of his wife. The driver escorted me about for several days. Could you imagine what the Uber charge would be if you were escorted about for days? Ooh, I would not. Buddy, it's a good thing he's successful. And it's a good thing he's got a charming wife and family, because, that's a lot. Like, and keep in mind, there's not cell phones, there's not pagers, there's not like Apple tags or whatever they are. Like, there's not a way to find this guy. Could you imagine just showing up at the airport to pick up your spouse and they're not there and they don't show up for days? Oops, big oopsies on that. So I know little of where I did or where I went or what I said and did. That's more of a blackout than a brownout. Whoop. Then came the hospital with unbearable mental and physical suffering. Now, that unbearable mental suffering is that remorse and regret that we have that morning after, that guilt and that shame. Because I don't want to do this. I don't want to hurt myself. I don't want to hurt the ones I love. I don't want to be, I genuinely did used to go missing. I don't want to do that, but I do that. So it says, as soon as I regained my ability to think, I went carefully over that evening in Washington. So he's trying to figure out what happened. Not only had I been off guard, I had made no fight whatever against the first drink. This time I had not thought of the consequences at all. He did not think to play the tape through the end. He didn't think about, what the alcoholics had said. He didn't think, oh, this could be the mental obsession. He didn't think, I love my wife, I love my family. I don't want to do this. He couldn't think about any of that at all. He couldn't think about the humiliating experience. None of it came to mind. And that is the power of the mental obsession. That thought, a cocktail with dinner would be nice. That surmounts all of the consequences. And at no point did the consequences come to mind. That is the power of this thing. He goes on to say, I commenced to drink as carelessly as though the cocktails were ginger ale. I now remembered what my alcoholic friends had told me, how they prophesized. What that means is predicted, right? Predicted that if I had an alcoholic mind, the time and place would come. I would drink again. Now that is what the predicted, foretold, and that same prediction that they made, to Fred. I was going to call him Harry. I got his names confused. Well, it's Fred or Harry. They're interchangeable. But what they told to Fred, which is, if you have this illness, you will drink again. That is being told to us. If I have this illness, a time and a place will come. I will drink again. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when I drink again. If I have this illness and I do not treat this illness with the spiritual experience that happens as the result of the 12 steps. Does that make sense? Like, that's step one, guys. Like, holy moly, feel free to put in some expletives. I try to watch my language. But holy moly, I will relapse. That's step one. I know. I do pretty good at watching my language here, but when I'm with Spot season, I get a little tired. Sometimes it gets a little much. So they said that though I did raise a defense, it would one day give way before some trivial reason for having a drink. So I'm going to, raise this defense. I'm going to imagine like this army or this wall, like, man, I'm not going to drink. And it's going to fall away for a cocktail would be nice with dinner. Like, could you imagine like creating like an army to show up in force? And what is standing against the army is a couple cocktails. That would be nice. And it's gone. Like, that is the power of alcoholism. My best defense will eventually crumble. So it says, well, just that did happen and more. For what I had learned of alcoholism did not occur to me at all. At all. I knew from that moment I had an alcoholic mind. Having an alcoholic mind is having the mental obsession. I saw that willpower and self-knowledge would not help in those strange mental blank spots. Those strange mental blank spots, the mental obsession. So willpower and self-knowledge will not help even a little bit when that mental obsession hits. There will be times where, holidays are coming around the corner and people are drinking and you're like, oh, no, thank you. No, thank you. But man, if I have this illness and this illness is untreated, it's going to hit, and there's nothing that I can do to put between me and that first drink or that first drug or that first addictive behavior, whatever it is that brings you to this study. That's the hopelessness. And this is good, because what's the transition that we always want to make here in this big book study from hopelessness to hope? If I cannot see my hopelessness, I grab a hold of that hope. Just like Fred, he had no problem in step one, so he had no need for step two. He had no problems. He wasn't going to do this thing. He's got it. But when I can see the reality of my hopelessness, man, I'm a grab a hold. So I had never been able to understand people who said a problem had them hopelessly defeated. There it is again, hopelessly defeated. I knew then it was a crushing blow. And man, the reality is we're in 12 step. Experiencing those crushing blows, like, man, it is painful and it is like, it's ego deflating and it's not fun and it's not pleasant, but that is, man, there's no better place to be than like, I can't do this on my own. It's a perfect place to be. Now it says, 2 of the members of Alcoholics Anonymous came to see me. They grinned, which I didn't like so much. Now, I'm going to just pause right there, because I would read that for a long time, like before I really got into sponsoring and working with others. And I would read it as the 2 alcoholics showing up like, ha, I told you so. Ha, called you on that one. Look at that. Ha, you're drunk. And that's how I would read it until I started really, really working with others. And when you sit down with somebody and you share your experience, you're trying to go through the book with them, and you can just tell they're closed, just like Fred. And they're not open and they're not willing, and they've got plans, and maybe it's been us. We've got those plans. We've got those designs, and it's not like, man, just grab a hold, right? And then I've worked with the same sponsees. Yeah. Concede is to admit, to agree, to accept. Oh, sorry, I'm ahead. Sorry. Yeah, concede. We haven't read that word yet. I just really, again, if you're wanting me to go on a tangent, I will. Like, whee! But here's what I found. When I've worked with those same sponsees, they were like, no. What I really need, Paige, you don't understand. What I really need to do is this. And I'm like, okay, why don't you try that? And then they come to me and they're broken and they're crying and they've had their life fall apart. And you can just see the hopelessness and desperation. I don't think they're grinning because they're like, haha, I told you so. They're definitely not grinning because another human being is in pain. But I think they're grinning because they're able to see that window of willingness is open. Oh man, you might actually do this. You want to run some inventory? That'll help. Let's go. You know what I mean? I think that's why they're grinning. Yes, yeah. I mean, I won't say it's been more than just you, but there might be somebody who was definitely that vague, broad applies to more than one person. Description applies, but yeah, it also applies to you very specifically. Glad to hear. And that window of willingness is open, and what's beautiful about that window of willingness is we all get it, right? When we come to the rooms, we get this window of willingness. And if I take action to let the God of my understanding that I don't like or I don't believe in or whatever work in my life, man, that'll be able to stay open. But if I don't take action, it'll inevitably close. And I'll drink again. Yeah, Bill Wilson and Fitz Mayo. Yeah. I love my Billy Dubs and I love my Fitz Mayo. He's one of my guys. I don't know why these like old dudes in AA, I'm like, they're my homies, we're best friends. They've all been dead for years. So it says they grinned, which I didn't like so much, and then asked me if I thought myself an alcoholic and if I were really licked this time. And that coincides to something that we're going to see later on throughout the book. I'll just pop us to one of those places really quick. Let's go to page 58. Just really quickly. And we're in the second paragraph of the page of the chapter, how it works. When it says our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you've decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. So they're asking essentially that same question. Hey, do you think you're an alcoholic? Do you think you're really licked as in you're willing to go to any lengths? I wasn't planning. I mean, there's places all over. I wasn't planning on going to some of them, but yeah, I will do my best to focus. Okay, let's pop back. So they asked 42. They asked me if I thought myself an alcoholic and if I were really licked this time. Do you think you have this illness? And are you done? Like, can you see that hopelessness? I had to concede. Now that was what distracted me in the chat because I get excited about words. Concede is like, now I got to pull it back up because, your thing worked really well. Chat. So it was concede, admit, agree with, accept, acknowledge, to show, although often against one's will, which I think is perfect. Because how do we concede? Not often consensually. Like the illness has beaten me into a place of concession where I've come to the end of myself where I don't want to, but I can see it clearly. You know what I mean? So he had to concede both propositions, that he was really licked and that he thinks he has alcoholism. So it says they piled on me heaps of evidence to the effect that an alcoholic mentality, the mental obsession, such as I had exhibited in Washington, was a hopeless condition. There that is again, hopeless condition. So it says they cited cases out of their own experience by the dozen. Dozen means 12. So they're showing up with like 12 like examples from their own life of the mental obsession. And then it says this process snuffed out the last flicker of conviction that I could do the job myself. And that moment where the last flicker of conviction is snuffed out, that is his step one. That is Fred's step one experience. And see, the flicker of conviction is imagine a little flame, like, no, I can do it. No. And then snuffed out is where you like blow out or, remove the oxygen so the candle flame goes. That's the metaphor. So they outlined the spiritual answer, a spiritual awakening. That's what we're after here. And the program of action, which for us today are the 12 steps taken out of this book, which 100 of them had followed successfully. Though I had been only a nominal churchman, their proposals were not intellectually hard to swallow. So he's kind of open to that idea of like, okay, there could be a power greater than myself. But the program of action, though entirely sensible, was pretty drastic. So if you came to the rooms and you saw the steps on the wall or on the Zoom screen and you're like, whoa, that seems a little drastic. Yeah, you're not, that's most of us. Most of us felt that way. Yeah, including our homeboy Fred. And it says it meant I would have to throw several lifelong conceptions out the window. So he had to get rid of his old ideas. So that was not easy. But the moment I made up my mind to go through with the process, now when he makes up his mind to go through with the process of the 12 steps, that is his step 3. You can make a little note of that. I had the curious feeling that my alcoholic condition was relieved, as in fact it proved to be. It goes on to say, quite as important was the discovery that spiritual principles would solve all my problems. All my problems, not just my alcoholism or addiction or compulsive behavior that brings me to this study, but all my problems. I get to take everything through these steps. I get to let the spiritual principles, spiritual actions, and the steps and the power of God work in all areas of my life. All my problems. Gives me an indication that all my problems are spiritual. Ooh. I didn't think that when I got here. If you got here, you told me all my problems were spiritual. I'm like, I don't, have you had a look at my bank account? But it's true. All my problems are spiritual. I have since been brought into a way of living. I'm going to be annoying. It's a way of life. It's not a set it and forget it deal. I can't do this for 30 days, 60 days net. I got to keep doing this as a way of life. Brought into a way of life infinitely more satisfying, and I hope more useful than the life I had lived before. That's what's on offer, this way of life. And I talk about how I can't set it and forget it. I got to continue to do this work, continue to live this way of life. But man, this way of life is more satisfying and in my experience, more useful than the life I'd lived before. My life is mean. And we were kind of joking before the meeting. We're like, what would I do if I didn't do this? Like, oh, like this has given me meaning and purpose, and my life meaning and purpose to be the small part in the miracle that happens for somebody else. It's this way of life works. And he says, my old manner of life was by no means a bad one. He wasn't peeing behind dumpsters like I was, like a lady, but I would not exchange its best moments for the worst I have now. I would not go back to it even if I could. He wouldn't, that's what he's saying. He wouldn't go back to his old life, even if he could. It says Fred's story speaks for itself. We hope it strikes home to thousands like him. He had felt only the first nip of the ringer. And we were talking about that ringer before, before we had drying, why do I forget the name? Washing machine and dryers? I keep wanting to call them drying machines. Those newfangled drying machines. Back in my day when we used the washboard and the wringer. So the wringer, you'd put the clothes and it would compress them, and like two things that would just compress them. And you wouldn't want to get nothing stuck in that wringer. Now, that's what happened for Fred. Yeah, Rob's got the scars to prove it. You don't want nothing caught, right? Fred didn't catch as much of the wringer as Rob did, He only got a little nip of the wringer, right? And so first nip of the ring, that's what that means. And it says most alcoholics have to be pretty badly mangled before they really can commence to solve their problems. And here's my experience. Because if you're reading that and you're like, man, I don't know. It is not an external mangling. It is an internal mangling. Most alcoholics have to be pretty badly mangled, in my experience, internally before they really commence to solve their problems. So it says, Many doctors and psychiatrists agree with our conclusions. One of these men, staff member at a world-renowned hospital, recently made the statement to some of us. Now, this is Dr. Percy Pollack at the Bellevue Hospital in New York. But an interesting thing is Dr. Leslie B. Holman of Johns Hopkins University. She said something almost identical. She's not credited as it, but she said something almost identical, which is just so interesting. So it says, what you say about the general hopelessness of the average alcoholic's plight is, in my opinion, correct. So that hopelessness. So this is a doctor, Dr. Percy Pollack. He's saying we're hopeless. And as to two men, and it was probably Bill and Fitzmayo, if I were to guess the two men who showed up, that one's a guess. Whose stories I have heard, there was no doubt in my mind that you were 100% hopeless, apart from divine help. Hopeless. And divine help, a power greater than ourselves. Had you offered yourselves as patients at this hospital, I would not have taken you if I'd been able to avoid it. People like you are too heartbreaking. You know, I never would have thought that I would affect somebody at a hospital like that with my alcoholism. You know what I mean? I do not know who is all affected by my illness. That by that same token, I do not know who my recovery can help. That same ripple effect goes out. Though not a religious person, I have a profound respect for the spiritual approach in cases such as yours. For most cases, there is virtually no other solution. So if I don't have this illness, I got options. I got all these other things that I can do. If I have this illness, there's virtually no other solution. And then once more, so in this small little paragraph, we're hammering home everything that we've read so far in this chapter. Once more, the alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first drink. Except in a few rare cases, neither he nor any other human being can provide such a defense. His defense must come from a capital H, capital P, higher power. And that's what we're going to start talking about next week as we rock and roll into step 2. So thanks for coming. I'll stop the recording and we can say a prayer together.